The 1974 World Cup, hosted by West Germany, saw them crowned champions of the world for the second time. Legends such as Gerd Müller and Franz Beckenbauer dazzled all tournament long for the West Germans, but a lot of the football was overshadowed by what was possibly the most politically charged football match of all time being played out in the first group stage, where, in a cruel twist of fate, the hosts were forced to lock horns with their own countrymen. In their first and only World Cup appearance, East Germany were drawn in the same group as West Germany, and the World Cup became a battleground for the Cold War. The game became known as Ein Kampf zwischen Brüdern, which translates as a struggle between brothers. West or East German, they were all Germans, two completely independent nations, but the same shared culture, language and national identity. They did not want to fight each other, they wanted to be united. But their country had been ripped apart to be used as puppets for the world superpowers, a competition to prove which economic system was superior. Here's a 30-second, massively oversimplified explanation of how that happened. Following Nazi Germany's defeat at the end of World War II in 1945, Germany was jointly occupied by the Allies, with separate areas of control for the Communist Soviet Union and the capitalist USA, UK and France. However, it soon became clear that the US and the USSR were not getting along as a result of their different ideologies, and they began to impose themselves on their occupied territories to demonstrate which would bring about more prosperity. And to cut a long story short, eventually the area controlled by the Western Allies merged and became the independent West Germany, which was aligned with the US, while the Soviet-occupied region became East Germany, which was one of the many Soviet satellite states stuck behind the Iron Curtain. So let's fast forward all the way to January 1974, when the World Cup draw was made. The Cold War had been ongoing for nearly 30 years now, and the two Germanys were still very much politically opposed, although the West had done a lot better for itself, having experienced an economic miracle, having democratic elections and having joined NATO, while East Germany was significantly poorer and ruled under the iron fist of a one-party Leninist government. So when 11-year-old boy Detlef Langer made the draw that would pit them together in the world's biggest sporting event, the reaction in the room was apparently initial shock, followed by a wave of anticipation for what had the potential to be an incredibly exciting matchup. Outside the footballing sphere, the game was viewed on the global scene as yet another proxy war to prove which out of capitalism or communism was superior. An East German win would be a huge victory for the Soviets and their propaganda, although on the other hand, a West German victory wouldn't really change anything. West Germany were undeniably the better team on paper. They had won the Euros just 2 years earlier, and their biggest club, Bayern Munich, had won the European Cup this year and would also go on to win the next 2 editions. Simply put, a Western victory was expected, so the East had a lot more to gain politically than the West did. As well as this, many in East Germany would have actually been supporting the West. Think about it. This isn't like a rivalry between two local clubs. This is the same country, competing as two different teams. They had no reason to support the East over the West, and in fact, all that a win for the East would achieve would be providing propaganda for a deeply unpopular regime. So with the stage set for what promised to be one of the most interesting matches of all time, let's fast forward to the summer of 1974 with the World Cup in full swing. Of course, fate dictated that the much-awaited tie between the Germans would take place as the final match of the group. Also in the group with the two Germanys were Australia, who were comfortably seen off by both sides, and Chile, who provided much sterner opposition. West Germany managed a narrow 1-0 victory, while East Germany were held to a draw against La Roja. These were the days before the final group games were played simultaneously, so when Australia and Chile drew in their final game, 3 hours earlier than the Germans' game, they both knew that they were guaranteed to qualify, but who would get the prestige of topping the group and the major diplomatic win that would come with it? While both teams were warming up in Hamburg's Volkspark Stadion, chants of Deutschland, Deutschland rang out from the West Germans in the stadium. Was this intended to be support for their own team, or a message that they considered all 22 players on the pitch to be Germans, one and the same, needlessly divided? We don't know, but what we do know is that this was a momentous occasion. Germany had been divided for decades, its citizens not allowed to travel between East and West, but for 90 short minutes, the nation was reunited on the football pitch. It was a brief reprise of the unified German nation that the fans longed for the return of. Despite the lack of rivalry between the players on the pitch towards each other and the attitudes of the West German fans, it was certainly still a tense affair. Of the 60,000 fans in attendance, all were West German fans except for a tiny contingent of around 1,500 East Germans, carefully selected and of course hardline supporters of the regime. They wanted to see an upset. And of course the players were well aware of the political ramifications of whatever the result would be in a game which was essentially a microcosm of the Cold War. As such, no one wanted to make the critical mistake. So as you might expect, the first half was fairly cagey. West Germany had been the dominant team in the first half but struggled to create. The closest they came was when Gerd Müller attempted to square the ball for Jurgen Grabowski but put it behind him, wasting the chance. The best chance of the half, however, fell to the East Germans when Reinhard Lauck played the ball across the box, beating both defender and goalkeeper, leaving usually prolific Dynamo Dresden striker Hansi Kreischer unmarked 6 yards out with an open goal. It may have been the pressure of the occasion, or maybe he simply just misjudged the bounce of the ball as he leant back, got way under it and blasted it into orbit. The two sides headed back down the tunnel for half-time with the game goalless. A draw would have seen West Germany progress as group winners, and that was beginning to seem likely in the early stages of the second half. West Germany continued to fail to break through the solid wall of blue shirts and were limited to wayward long shots, while East Germany was struggling to create any chances of their own. In an attempt to break the deadlock, West Germany manager Helmut Schön made a few attacking subs, but it was the man in the other dugout, George Buschner, who made the pivotal change, bringing on midfielder Erich Hamann. In the 77th minute, Uli Hoeneß's cross couldn't be turned in and the ball was claimed by East German keeper Jürgen Kroy. Looking up, he spotted Hamann, the 30-year-old, on just his third cap unmarked on the right flank and threw it out to him to initiate a counter-attack. It's clear that there were some tired legs on the pitch because the attempts to close down Hamann were frankly pathetic, so with no one coming near him he was able to drive into the West German half and perfectly pick out the on-rushing Jürgen Sparwasser, who received the ball between the two centre-backs, took a chested first touch which easily beat the challenge of Franz Beckenbauer before belting the ball into the roof of the net, 1-0. He didn't quite seem to know how to react and went for a slightly awkward forward roll as a celebration before running to the touchline and collapsing to the ground while his teammates went crazy around him. Jürgen Sparwasser had just done the unthinkable. East Germany were leading against their Western brothers. It's hard to imagine just how momentous this must have felt to these East German players. In a game between two halves of the same nation, they were representing the far less prosperous half, ruled under a horribly oppressive and unpopular regime that would no doubt be delighted to get one over the West. But there also must have been a huge amount of personal pride to defeat their more privileged brothers in their own territory. This game really did transcend football. It was a political, social and economical battle all rolled into one, with the two combatants being the same people who really did not want to have to fight each other. They wanted to be united. It's impossible to put into words what everyone in the ground must have been thinking when Sparwasser put East Germany ahead. In the end, that one goal did prove to be the winner. West Germany piled forward, but the East German wall held firm and there was no way to break through. Jürgen Kroy remained relatively unthreatened in goal and eventually the full-time whistle sounded. West Germany 0, East Germany 1. Sparwasser summed up the significance of the occasion neatly, saying that if one day my gravestone simply says Hamburg 74, everyone will still know who is lying below. There were rumours that on his arrival back home, he was richly rewarded for this goal with an expensive car, house and a large cash payment. Sparwasser bluntly refuted this and in 1988 he defected to West Germany. Just 1 year later, in an incredibly significant moment, the Berlin Wall was toppled and after 4 painful decades of division, the German people were finally all reunified under one nation. So for the rest of the 74 World Cup, how did the two Germanys fare? Well, almost immediately, the political victory for the communist regime seemed a bit hollow, as finishing first in the group landed East Germany in a brutally difficult second group stage, containing the Netherlands, Argentina and Brazil, where only the side finishing top would qualify for the final. East Germany managed just a single point, getting a 1-1 draw with Argentina, while Rinus Michel's legendary total football Dutch team progressed to the final. The group that West Germany ended up in was considerably less star-studded and they won all 3 games against Yugoslavia, Sweden and Poland. In the final they pulled off an astonishing upset against not just the tournament's best side, but one of the best of all time, coming from 1 down to beat Johan Cruyff & Co. 2-1. In the end, the political propaganda gained from East beating West in a one-off game was far outshone by West Germany going on to become champions of the world just 2 weeks later. East Germany may have won the battle, but West Germany won the war. Thanks a lot for watching this video. This is definitely the most interesting video I've had to make in terms of research, and if you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe and also follow me on Twitter. The link's on the screen now. Anyway, see you next time.